Okay, thanks very much. So everybody is here. Any declarations of interest? No, I note that on the biodiversity projects, the Environmental Enhancement Fund, an organisation that I volunteer for, don't get any payment for, is the Forest Restoration Trust, which is getting its money from that fund each year, about $6,000. So I don't think any of our decisions will make any difference to that, but I just thought I'd mention that. Public forum, petitions, deputations, don't have any of those. Minutes of the Finance and Performance Committee held on the 22nd of February. Somebody like to move that's a true and correct record, Jeremy? Phil, thanks very much. Any other comments on that? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. No extraordinary or urgent business I'm aware of. Any questions? Okay, and any reports? I don't have a report. No. Okay, so we'll go on to the business services report. Item 1, the audit management letter. Pretty detailed letter. Tanya, are you going to lead us through this or explain it a bit more?
Yes, Chair, good morning. So the item refers to a letter proposed fee. So just look at the audit engagement letter, page 13. It is as it says in the item, the standard letter engaging us, ourselves and Deloitte's process that we have to go through. We've read it, discussed it with the audit senior, and they've answered our questions. I'll just recommend to you that it is appropriate that we accept this. We found Deloitte to be exceptionally good to work with as auditors. They've gone out of the way everything I've been for 5 years to ensure that we complete on time. They are still independent, but we find the customer service to be exceptionally good and their feedback to the council.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Jeremy?
Hopefully they hear in regards to the understand that the sector is the whole sector, is that correct?
They're appointed by the Auditor General.
Yeah.
Uses different accountants or firms throughout New Zealand. Largely they do it themselves with a pen, and then they speak to Deloitte's. I think Deloitte's have 6 in the southern area.
Yeah.
SBC, themselves, EDC.
So just from there, like I'm just clarifying on but so the reality is it's actually chosen for us. Yeah.
If we were the feedback is that it was not suitable, we have an opportunity, but I would think that with the stress that's been on the audit, we are asked every year to fill in a survey and to advise the Auditor General of who found the service and feedback. And I think so the chair, the chair gets to do that as in the past.
All right, Jeremy?
Yes.
Phil?
I'm just going to inquire, just out of curiosity more than anything, around why the approach is different this year for agreeing to the fees for the first year, but then holding off to confirm subsequently the fees for year 2 and 3. That seems like a deviation from what occurred in the previous period.
Again, it's apparently standard. I think it's to do with the resourcing and the inflation costs that they've perhaps been called out that 30-year cost fee. The escalation, they were committed to that.
So this reflects sort of a dynamic, volatile, wider ecosystem that they're functioning.
We are We hope to receive this proposal some months before we have, to be fair. We actually met the auditors in person in the end of January. And met their new auditors. So each partner can only remain with one client for 5 years or 5 years. So we have a audit partner handover this year. Based in Christchurch, he's very so, but they said at the time that they had put their proposal to the Office of the Auditor General, but it's taken some months for the OAG to actually go through all the proposals, make sure that they line up in terms of price, that everybody is paying appropriate price. The price is determined by the Audit Office.
Thanks, Al.
Yeah, Jeremy answered one there, because my thing was, is it put out the tender? The answer is no, because of the sweet deal. But the 20% lift between years, are they doing 20% more work, or what's, do we just have to accept that because of the sweet deal we've got with the auditor's office?
There's appropriate pushback on terminology. But the Auditor General selects the auditors based on their ability to do the job, and I'm sure that they are monitoring all across the industry. And that is why all the proposals go to Audit General to be checked and validated properly. So I would choose not to accept those words sweetly. The 20%, I think, reflects the fact that the first price was set 3.5 years ago. Morrison asked, that was a contracted price. But we were expecting a 15% increase. They, over at a minimum, I mean, they advised us, and we absolutely understand this, that their own staff pricing went up 15%, and even to keep accountants in New Zealand. So we've discussed this at the national conference, not our we didn't have LP, but in general, the industry were all together in Queenstown several weeks ago. We're talking about the pressure on audit resource and the expected cost increases that were coming. I've looked through this. I've looked at the resource that they've used versus what they budgeted to use. I'm happy. I did ask questions of them in terms of the level of staff that they've chosen to allocate here. They've put in some more management hours and more manager hours than they had in the past. That reflects the complexity of the organisation, the expectation on the industry to ensure that they can all of the statutory audit checks.
Yes, thank you, Tania. Yes, I think I'm satisfied, that there is a lot of examination of this to make sure that it is a fair price and that what we're getting is appropriate. I think that's a very rigorous process, and I think that there is quite a big cost increase, but I think that in the circumstances appears to be justified. Lyndall.
Thanks, Chairman. My questions have been asked really, so I guess my only comment would be to endorse the work that Deloitte's have done for us, given that some of our fellow, some of the TAs were delayed in getting their work done because they weren't with Deloitte, and we didn't suffer any delays or any consequences of the tremendous workload that came through after COVID. So, with the changeover of personnel, I think we're really open to the recommendations of the really.
Just got a couple more questions, and then I'll remember that though. Nicole.
Yes, I guess I'm always a bit grumpy that we are a price taker rather than a negotiator. And if you look at the stats on page 26, it's quite interesting that more hours were done last year, and particularly by non-CA qualified people, but the price was actually lower than budgeted. So the assumption is we're going to do almost as many as, but more highly qualified people. So it's just, you know, always ask this question, are we getting the best deal we can? And yeah, I acknowledge the very good service we have from them, but so we came in under budget last year at 138,268, and it was mainly because we actually had a lot of hours there, 292 hours, which were obviously at a better rate, but we still got a good result. So total was 550, but when they were actually only 460 this year, they're budgeting for 540 hours, but the cost goes up significantly. So I don't know if it's a question we can ask them. We really like your cheaper staff doing more hours because we're getting a better result and happy with everything else. But it is basic. We've allocated an auditor and we just pay basically, and so there's not really any ability to negotiate a rate, which in most other spheres of life you would have that opportunity.
Okay, thanks. Yes, sorry.
I'll just reply to Councillor Horrell's question.
Yeah.
That was exactly the question I asked. It's the change in allocation of staff versus your actuals. And the reality is they didn't have sufficient CA staff, hence more hours. But the ideal situation is that allocation of staff as budgeted here. And you can see this is not the first year in a row. So they've budgeted 460 hours, I think, for the last 3 years, but they've come in over 500 hours each year. So what that means is that they are potentially on blue consolidation, and they're straightening them up here. Budgeted hours and your actual hours closer together. And that's the risk for them of budgeting out 3 years in advance.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. One is on page, relates to us really, page 23, which talks about conflicts of interest and related parties. I know we've got a document which sets out the councillors' ones and the staff ones. And at a recent meeting, I think we had to update our councillors' conflicts of interest schedule, and I was one of the miscreants there. And I just want to check to make sure that everybody has updated that and that we do have one for all councillors now. Is that the case?
We certainly do have a list, Chair, but it's always good to review it yourself, particularly if you've been on council for a couple of years. There might be things that have changed. So we definitely encourage, and it's not an ideal time now as we get towards the end of the financial year, to perhaps check in with Jan and check to see what your statements of profit are.
Okay, thanks, Annie. So if we haven't done that recently, could you please make sure you do that? Yes, Neville?
Yeah, just on that, Jan to give me the old one and it didn't need changed.
Yeah.
So it's not so much conflict of interest, but it's actually transparency and the interests we have. And most of them are very minor, but we are supposed to have them on the website. And I think the last time the auditors did pick up something that was a company I thought was bankrupt, but they've done a search and I was the smallest shareholder. I'm quite happy to sell them shares actually, but it's a thing they do check that, which is good. And so they'll always check the public companies to see if they pop up. And so things, and that was one of the things I had was I've been on the People Fire Trust, which I'm now not. So I think it's time every couple of years, councillors probably should review that to make sure it's accurate.
All right, thank you. Lyndall?
Yeah, just wanted to follow that up because it came up at strategy and policy recently as well. So within the last couple of months, Jens should send everybody the request for that information. So we haven't done it directly.
Right, thank you. Jeremy?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, it was actually quite, I was one of it's a bit of smack on the hand as well, and good to see someone knows my business better than I do. So, but it was actually quite good to see that they were actually taking the point of checking what we were doing. Give me a bit of faith in that they are certainly dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So, yeah, so it does work.
Right, thank you. Okay, so we're getting towards the end of our time for this particular item, but I do have one more question, and that is on page 28, where it says about halfway down the page, it says this fee excludes any additional audit procedures applied in relation to climate change. I wonder what that might mean and what the consequences could be.
I'm not sure what that is, to be fair. I asked a number of other questions, but I didn't ask that one. I would suggest it's a disclaimer as to should significant policy change or something come in during this period that would require us to do something else. I mean, because they do audit us in the infrastructure strategy for our adaptation, climate adaptation strategies and policies. So I'm not sure why they would disclose, declare that.
Perhaps you
If
could,
it shouldn't change significantly, we will discuss with you at the time, and maybe that's just there. I
yeah,
can clarify that later.
okay, thanks.
And just
All right.
that same issue, Mr. Chair, with the floods in the North Island, it may mean that some of those councils are late getting information, and that it is probably a climate change related factor so they're covering themselves there too. So I think, I'm not sure that they are going to be flooded, but they're putting a factor in there, and we know some of those North Island councils will struggle with a whole lot of things.
Right. Well, thanks, Tony. If you can perhaps follow that up a bit, that would be great. And Lyndall moved earlier that we agree to this recommendation, seconded by Jeremy. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. It's carried. Thank you. Item 2, the annual vehicle report. Thank you, Tanya. Paul? Amy?
Right, so I take the report as read. So we're getting to the back end of our current replacement program for the 22-23 financial year, and we are now to go forward with replacing a further 11 of our eligible vehicles for replacement. So if there's any questions or anything that you may have.
Okay. Nicole?
Yes, no, a very good report. And let's see, we've had those 3 revs that have been rental and probably haven't been doing enough miles. So I think it's a really smart move is to actually buy them. So that's good, and we appear to be getting a good run out of them. I have a look at the criteria, and it probably balances out, but most, we've got 4 years and 120 Ks or 150. We probably do get the flexibility just with the cost and other things. But most vehicles these days are going to be pretty good for another 30,000 Ks. But I'm sure it's something you take into consideration is resale and all those sorts of things. So overall, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm sure you're looking at those criteria, and often we've got vehicles that are sort of pick some of the criteria, but they're probably fine for another 12 months, which is what you're doing with the identifying 22 and replacing 11.
Thank you, Nicole. Jeremy?
Just in regards, I always enjoy this topic each year, and I don't see too many bicycles being bought, and always thought the chief executive in the past was keen for supply with electric bike, but anyway, I won't give up. Just in regards, obviously there's 26, we're replacing vehicles every year, and I know there's out 26, but are we getting in the routine of saying replacing 12 a year, so every 5 years?
Yeah, so we're trying to make it as cyclic as possible. Unfortunately, we are under some requirement, from a purchasing perspective, that we are locked into what is supplied and what is available for supply at the moment. So we have found that, that's been pretty challenging over the last few years. It's actually get stuck into the country and actually within the financial year as such. So that's one of our challenges. But yeah, it's trying to keep it as cyclical as possible and looking at it as, over a 5-6 year period to replace those eligible vehicles.
And the other. We'll say good to know, because this is obviously a lot of the communities talk about all the how many vehicles. I guess you've got another question too. Is that we are actually decreasing since we've been here. We have decreased the amount of vehicles. So we should point that out. We know probably our employees. They're not all efficient, so people know that.
Yeah.
So, and just going through you, Chair, to build on the, I think last time we talked about vehicles, we said that we were fully introducing the bucket system into the organisation. It's been trialled last year, but actually we're starting to get much better data on how we are utilising those vehicles and looking for better utilisation of these vehicles. So as you say, whilst the staff numbers have increased, we can maintain and decrease the fleet because we're looking at or more flexibly in order to deliver the work.
One quick question was, are you changing the colours? Are we getting away from white? We talked about this last time. White lanes, of course. It's always been talked about the white vehicles coming up the drive. Not trying to fool them,
No, you'd only fool them for a while, and then there'd be commentary about the yellow vehicles or the orange vehicles or the pink vehicles.
It's just that we are regulators, but we are educators too. Okay,
Lyndall?
Thanks. Amy's pretty much answered it actually, because I was going to ask about how the bucket system had informed the number of vehicles you were looking to purchase. So I appreciate that it's in its early days yet. But just need to be sure that that's still informing how many we need to purchase.
I think you're right, it's early days at the moment, and what we also know is that our work is seasonal, so we need to make sure that we have got comprehensive data, and when you think about the historical data that we've got, acknowledging that we haven't had the bucket system historically, it's sort of been a bit coloured by a lack of activity or reduced activity during COVID as well over the past couple of years. So just getting back to new normal work as well.
Supplementary to that then is how much longer will we need? I mean, you're looking at kind of another couple of years to get a full picture of it. Not that it's ever going to end.
Yeah, I would say, a good 12 months of utilisation of the booking system will give us some really, pointed data. We do have all the other back-end data for the vehicles themselves, and we've got mileage, we've got, costs, we've got suppliers and speeds and everything and distances. So we've got all that other data that will help us inform, our utilisation of offers.
Look, and as we go forward as well, there's other things happening in the organisation that may impact on fleet usage, and the information management update that's coming in a couple of items' time, talks about the implementation of the cameras that we've got on the rivers, and technology like that going forwards may reduce the need for visits. I'm not saying it will, absolutely, and I'm not saying that technology specifically will do it. But as we look at embracing technology in different parts of our work, that will impact how we deliver it.
Nicole?
It's just a supplementary after your comment about the difficulty at the moment and getting the vehicle of choice. For the following year, will you actually look at looking forward? I know where it is at the moment, probably often 6 to 8 months from order to delivery time. just probably a thought to make sure you do get your vehicle of choice rather than just what's available.
Yeah, so I mean, we've gone through quite a rigorous assessment process in the last round of purchasing vehicles. You know, the Toyota obviously being paid a choice, however, very limited by availability with, you know, up to 12 months delivery time versus the Foresters, which have similar performance, but you know, far better turnaround time for us. So we can get that within you know, up to 6 months. We can actually get stuck in the country and have those vehicles up and running.
Al?
Yeah, it's interesting to hear really that from my constituents, you've got between 120 and 170 vehicles in your fleet. It's where it is. When you come to the disposal or sale of these things, the tender to employees or the sale to employees, how do you sort of safeguard that?
What do you mean by safeguard?
Well, safeguard it like if I was an employee and it may work like this, I'd get together and I put a low tender in with everybody else. Do you get a valuation on them? Or how do you?
Yeah. So it's the vehicles are evaluated prior. We get you know the full market rate, and that is the price of the vehicle to employees.
So there's no tender, it's just a sale. Okay.
Thanks, Al. I was going to ask a similar question, but I see that one of the means is to give the best return to the council. So that's a good safeguard. Jeremy?
Why? Do we need to challenge that, or is it just a policy to have a white truck? I'm just saying, why not?
That's a good question. I think it's just historically it's always been white. I think I'm not too sure there was ever a. But I mean, from a, you know, I think there's some safety benefits to using white vehicles and things like that. So you know, it's not visible. You know, they're easy to have the logos on, and you know, your logo stands out on the white background. You know, things like that. So I would suggest that's most probably, and also potentially back then the availability of the time. Do we need that?
I'm just putting down. Can I move something to?
Well,
I
You
don't.
want a review of the colour, why it's white and why not?
There's an environmental feeling, like I'm just saying that there is, I know what it's like in my trucks driving around. And it's the perception. I'm trying to get rid of the perception of what white trucks do. And it makes it feel, it may sound very silly, but it's actually can be, the perception can be quite confrontational. Oh, look, nobody else thinks so. It's fine. Just challenge it.
Lyndall?
Yeah, a couple of points. In an organisation that I worked for in the past, it was the white was required by the insurance company, which was interesting. I don't know whether that's still the case. It was a few years ago. So it was an insurance issue. But on the matter of perception, Councillor, perhaps we need to. Perhaps it's a behaviour and systems issue rather than the colour of the car. You know, if we change them to blue for water, clean water, if our service delivery and our customer service isn't good, then the perception of blue vehicles driving up the drive is still going to be stink. So I'm not sure that I would be asking staff to look into what we should do.
Thanks, Lyndall. Nicole and then Alistair.
Just on that, I think we're probably stuck mainly with the colour for the reasons been outlined, but it wouldn't hurt to have one or two in the fleet. And we do have the odd one that have got some rather lovely sign writing on the side, which is still white, but they're not totally white. That wouldn't hurt to have one or two in the fleet. I know when I used one of the police vehicles for a while, and Used to really make people nervous when I drove up the drive with the Lego. So, I think it's something we just get staff to look at.
I can just add to that, just from a safety perspective also, so we just got to consider that a lot of our vehicles do on the side road investigations or on culverts and bits and pieces. So often our vehicles are parked up on the side of the road. So any signage, road inspection that is on the back of a white ute is very visible. And then also, the visibility of our flashing beacons and so on stands out better against a white background. So it makes the vehicle, so it gives the vehicle that sense of authority standing on the side of the road that, it's there for a reason and it's actually doing, it stands out. So I would say from a safety perspective, that would be one of my reasons for keeping vehicles white.
Al?
Yeah, I'd leave them white because if you really look at it, the top councillors around here, Oracle and myself, have white vehicles for exactly the same reasons. The health and safety, because we're very poor drivers.
Thanks, Al.
I think we're-
Always in Riverstone, Joel.
Righto. Order. Thank you very much for that discussion. I think that the safety of our staff is important as well, and if a white vehicle is the safest vehicle, then we should bear that in mind. So I think from what I've heard is that there's not a great deal of appetite to change that. So are there any other questions on this vehicle?
So just an observation, that issue that was raised by Nicola around making sure we can access the vehicles we want in a timely manner given the supply demands. Does that suggest that as a maybe in council, we need to perhaps be thinking 24 months ahead in terms of our likely replacement needs for the subsequent year in order to start thinking around placing orders in advance to get access to the vehicles we need?
We change, we can look at it further. We changed the vehicle policy, was it last year? Yeah, we changed the timing last year to the one that we've currently got in order to try and accommodate what was, quite exacerbated post-COVID challenges to supply lines. We're happy to take that away and look at it further to see whether it's worth considering. I think the point to note is I don't think we're short of vehicles in the meantime, because we continue to use the vehicle till we've actually got access to the new vehicle and sell the old vehicle. So it's not leaving us short in the short term. But yeah, we'll take that away and we'll come back with a review of that.
Last one, Al.
I think that could be fraught with difficulty, sorry, simply because of the environment that's changing in our transport industry ahead of us now. In other words, it may be all hybrid vehicles, it might be all hydrogen, it might be whatever. You get too far out and you get stuck.
Yeah, well, we'll review.
Happy to move the item, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jeremy. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you very much for that discussion. Right. Item 3, financial report.
The forecast at that point for the 30th of June. We would like to note that at the 30th of March, at the 30th of March, there was an operating surplus of 276,000 versus a budgeted operating deficit of 5.5 million. As a result, we have forecast forward the 30th of June, and we have reforecast our operating deficit from down from 7.7 million to an operating deficit of 3.7 million. This information was known to us in April, and we have allowed for that in the final workshops with the plan. spent $4 million within the budget. It's a result of cruise ship income, not anticipated to return as strongly as it did. So we had $2.2 million of cruise ship money that has helped reduce our deficit. There is some budgeted underspend there of 1.8 million, combination which we've detailed there on page 36. 0.8 million of that, or 800,000 is IT, or what we call the digital transformation spend that's been not required this year as a result of the project and timing. And our recommendation is that that we actually, rather than put that money into the general reserve, that we recognise the long-term investment in digital transformation, and we put that money aside. The timing of these things we can't always do, and we obviously budgeted that in 2020 with the best information we had at the time. The finance that we had, turns out the bigger part of that will be coming towards 25, 26 perhaps. And our recommendation is not be side of that, but to acknowledge it as a timing difference. There'll be also note there that it's our obligation to rebuild, well, as per our own policy, to rebuild the marine fee reserve. And while we didn't budget for that $2 million this year, it's appropriate to take that benefit, start reserving that again, putting it aside. Yeah, before I go through page by page, are there any questions?
Nicole?
Just a couple of, it was very pleasing to see that improvement, and just looking at, well, quite encouraging that in the investment income, and we only really come to realise that we're with 477 ahead of budget. And I see since last time we talked about it, it looks like we're rebuilding the marine fee reserve quicker than we have, and I'm assuming it's because of the more favourable income streams that we're getting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anybody else? Jeremy?
Just in regards to obviously building the marine reserve, I keep on going back to, I'm trying to understand where we can spend that money. And I just think it'd be quite good at some point. And council session on that, not to just challenge it, but just obviously it is coming in, and if it'll be well, it'll build up pretty quick too. So it was just a wonderful look into the future. The IT reserve, you say that money won't be used till 25, 26.
The largest spend. So we have an equivalent amount of money in budget for 23, 24. That will be spent depending on the projects that are there, but the little information is at the top of the table, but it does look like our timeline to the bigger investment is going to be at that later date.
Yeah, the items that the money was tagged to be invested in still largely stand. It's the delivery timeline for those items have pushed out for reasons pretty much outside of our control into later time. So it's work we identified we want to do, and it's work we will do, but at the timing for that will push out to future years.
It's one of the, and I did have on beforehand. And in regards to this, that you've got to make sure the perception right, we're adding money. We're hanging on to it for a rainy day. Just make sure the public know that it is we're actually doing the work that it's going, you've been invested, especially if it's going out 25, 27. It's like that we actually need to grab it. A year ago or thereabouts, people rates going up. I prefer money be sitting in public's bank accounts rather than especially under the pressures at the moment than sitting in their bank accounts. So we just need to make sure it's very clear that this is going to be getting used.
So I would just like to observe that, you know, to me, the idea of establishing reserves where we are carrying both risk and or these opportunities more than a prudent approach. I guess my question is around in other playing spheres where I've seen reserves used effectively. They usually have a set of conditions established for their release. They will be released or applied, deployed under certain set of conditions emerging. I guess my question was, as we establish reserves for either the marine reserve and or in this case, technology reserve, is there a sort of a set of criteria that accompanies the intention around their application in the future?
So we have the statutory specified reserves. And reserves that council can create. We're not of the mind to have lots of reserves. Where there's reserves but amounts of money that are worthy of us putting aside and recognising. In this case, this would be the first reserve I've recommended that we create. But I've also noted that there's some councils that have hundreds of reserves, literally 300 reserves. And those little tiny jars only make it harder. This is digital trade. Our investment in digital and associated, well, nothing in size compared to climate change. Nevertheless, part of our forward planning. And if there was anything we could have done differently in LTP budgeting, it would have been, I could have waved a magic wand, it would have been to give us many things, but clarity, more clarity around the timing of these things, because we were relying on information given to us at the time by RSHL, and they were relying on their suppliers, and it was very much a work in progress at the time. So we have headed the timelines, the project is well underway. But I was speaking off subject, speaking to a manager today about asset replacement. It's a discipline that we do have in many of the parts of the organisation, but it's not one that we've necessarily had in digital. We've tended to have expensed the items as we needed. What we're looking to do now is say, well, let's build a 10-year plan for technology, and we should capitalise it where we think we're going to get a benefit. Expense out there is transitory and strong. So the reserve that we create will be in line with that 10-year plan.
Okay. Al, do you have anything?
No.
No? Okay. Nicole?
Another question on page 43, just looking at the debtors rate report, and I note that we 534,000 in the first 30 days overdue, which is quite an aberration on the other figures on the page. But at the bottom, we're saying that penalty rates charged was 402,000, which was 33,000 less. I'm trying to equate those two numbers when we appear to have quite a jump in that 30-day thing. The 60 and 90s are similar to the previous years.
So the answer to that, councillor, is at the top of the page we've got sundry debtors who are our compliance consent debtors, but also our cruise ship. I think partway down the page, just above the second blue line, it said included in the 30-day overdue balances on cruise ships totaling 184,000.
Okay.
And 288 for Department of Conservation. So those are sort of significant large items that are sitting there. Some of our government funding does take a little bit longer. In fact, if we look at the current balance, and as needed with 3.8 million, which is 3 million is another government project. The rates penalties are charged only on the rates debtors. And while the number for rates debtors is only marginally better than last year, it is coming down, and it notes that the rates penalties that we've charged are less.
Well, thanks for that. That makes sense. That's not into consideration.
I draw council's attention to page 41. That's the X-ray forecast. Out to June 24 to the end of the annual plan. The net debt forecast that we returned, which is 18 million overall debt, less 3 million in the bank basically at the time, and as per our annual plan discussions. But you can see that obviously it varies during the year. So a total amount of indebtedness won't be 18 million until 24th, 30th of June, or it will vary along the way as we receive our cash flow. But from that point, we effectively will have a hardcore debt of 15 million. It'll vary again in the future. So we will manage this cash flow the best we can using a combination of short and longer term debt. Borrow long term and invest the surplus. Look at the rates, which we borrow short term and have the longer term debt. So that's part of our debt management. Are there any other questions?
Al?
Debt management, do you deal with that, do you?
We're almost at the point where the debt from we can borrow from our GFA is nearly equivalent to what we can invest in the bank. So we're not many organisations are in that position. Good question.
I've got one, but Lyndall, have you got one?
Yes, but you can go first if you want.
Were you going to go through the tables?
If there is.
I've got one on, I'll ask you, on page 42, bottom of page 42, but the water and land plan. And it looks to me like the cost of that is nearly 15 million, is that right?
Yes, from 2010.
From 2010. So
Accumulated cost.
what is that? Legal fees,
It's staff time.
staff time, oh, yeah.
Legal fees, but it's the accumulated total cost of that project. We created that a few years ago when we changed the OPAC reports to just capture the real cost of some of these long-term projects.
Right. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff, but it is over that, it's been since 2010.
An investment, Chief.
Sorry?
It's an investment,
Investment. Right.
but it's not one we can capitalise.
It does highlight, Mr. Chairman, frustration of having a plan in the environment report for 6 or 7 years because that is a big cost.
Right, anybody else? Alistair?
That money's obviously coming from our ratepayers.
The water and land plan is funded by general rates, yes.
Hello?
Yeah, statement of financial. But we understand the big difference in employee entitlements.
Yes, sorry. Two parts to that. At the 31st of March, we had one whole payroll owing or accrued. So there's 600,000 sitting there extra that would be normally because it was to be paid, but it wasn't paid on the 31st of March. It would be paid on the next day. Oh, okay, Tuesday. Yeah. The underlying employee entitlements though has increased. I think we've seen it sitting at 17, 1.8 this year, rising, and I have asked for that to be reviewed, and the answer that came back, and I looked through that answer because I was quite interested in this, is that the average annual leave per person in terms of dollars has not changed. The number of people has changed, and so that has actually moved up. And the year before, 2022, was the same as 21 because we had that staff turnover. So we sort of got we've gone year to year. It doesn't make sense. No, it's effectively been increasing, but the dollars. What I'm saying is the liability has been increasing, but the numbers of staff at this particular point last year were lower. Right. So the average, the important thing is the average of the increased.
Or decreased.
Or decreased, no.
Right, thanks, Daniel. Any others? Anything else, Tony, you want to comment on?
No, yeah, I think, very thorough report and I'm happy with it.
Okay, somebody like to move or note that financial report, Master, seconded Bill, all those in favour, please say aye. Thanks, thank you, and thanks. Right, item 4, a long-term quarterly plan progress report to end of March. Rachel?
Morena. So essentially, this is the quarterly report on how we're going with the performance targets in the long-term plan, which relate to the different levels of service across those different groups of activities or portfolios. So it's the removed climate change and community resilience, regional leadership, executive portfolios. So I just wanted to highlight, because there may have been a wee bit of confusion. Previously, we reported against 56 performance targets in the long-term plan. That is still the case. There remains 56 targets. But as you would have seen from the report, we've moved everything into a new reporting system, Mahi, which has recently received a demonstration on. And when we did that, we managed to break some of those performance targets down a little bit further. That's exactly an example, so that makes a little bit more sense. So, turn to page 70, and you'll see performance target 9.1, which is without any biosecurity and biodiversity area. We've now split that into 3 targets underneath. So you've got 9.1.1, 9.1.2, and 9.1.3, just for a bit more clarity. So that gives us a slightly different total, which is why we've got 63 key activities instead of 56. So just to talk through where we're at, we retained some reds, and as explained at previous meetings, they are generally where things have changed from the original long-term plan. There are circumstances outside of our control, for example, the original policy statement review and the deferral of some of that because of delays in national legislation. You will see that there has been more amber starting to come through for this third quarter, and that's where we've got slightly less confidence than we did previously that we will complete certain programs or projects, and often the reason for that is due to availability of consultant contractor resource. So still overall a high level of confidence of 48 of 63 activities showing as green, but some movement into amber as we approach the end of the year. And I'm very happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Rachel. Any questions? Yes, Jeremy.
I see the democracy services, unfortunately, it's one of those ones where you're going to be 100% compliant, but any little mistake and all of a sudden your whole years haven't achieved. I do always think that perfection can be hard. I know that things work really hard, but it sort of gives a very negative single red there for a couple of years. Even from the point they got the papers and the meeting and time, but it was just out of time prior to it. So I know we're trying to be as good as we are, but too bad in spread against their neighbours, but we work pretty hard. But it is one of those things you go, is 100% actually correct number? You know what I mean? 95, okay. It's pretty damn good at times. Again, people do make mistakes and little glitches, so I'm just saying do a good job. But it does reflect on our compliance, saying we're not achieving what achievements are actually achievable. No question.
through you, Chair, that we have discussed previously that we've certainly taken some learnings from the pilots and current content, and some set the bar was slightly too high. And the board used to comment.
Anybody else? No.
I just glancing at the vivid red on 79, again, a lot of this is sort of out of our control. And this is on climate change and community resilience. Read all over it, but part of it's actually waiting for legislation in the first place. I think it's the arrival of LiDAR is probably going to be a big help. So that codes itself.
Yep.
Sorry, 25.1 on page 92. And no, for the level of service is as around progressing review of the South and Regional Policy Statement. And I just want to clarify which regional policy statement. Or is there some overarching?
I had a couple, and some of you can tell me if I'm a bit out of line here, but it is a particular thing that I'm concerned about. It's on page 74, where the target is to deliver management programs designed to improve regional biodiversity, human health and economic prosperity. And it's the regional biodiversity that I'm asking about, and councils will be aware, and you may also be aware, Rachel, that there are proposals in this organisation working with farmers to raise sheep and on river berms in northern Southland, where biodiversity can be high. Thinking about different types of native vegetation that could be affected by that activity. And I just wonder what the role of this committee or the might have in making sure that what we're trying to do in one area doesn't conflict with what we're trying to do in another area. I'm not saying that the grazing of sheep is a bad thing per se, but if it's if it conflicts with other things we're trying to do, how is that resolved?
So what you're essentially saying or asking is whether that particular project does line up with the levels of service and the overarching outcomes activities.
Yeah.
I'd be very happy to take that query away and come back to you with a report regarding a specific project. I don't know the detail on the project with me.
Okay, thank you. On page 82, there are some dates there which are a bit out of date now. I wonder whether that's important or not. 18.2, talk about a follow-up in early 2023, and that a meeting will be held in February. So those dates have passed, obviously. Is that an issue or not really?
So what you see is the reporting from previous quarters as well.
Yeah.
To show the transition during the year. So in some cases, where it's report previous quarters, the dates will look a wee bit behind where we are now.
Okay, so that's right. All right. Another question is the same as that one.
You just clarify, so what number on the biodiversity in the past?
Biodiversity.
Sorry, I was just still trying to find the.
Oh, yeah, okay. Page 74, 14.1. Right. That's all I had. Everybody else happy? Lyndall?
Yeah, just going back to your comment, Rachel, about how we've actually defined the targets. So not necessarily expecting an answer really, but how we are going to improve, I guess is the right word. No, define our targets and then LTB going forward. Yeah, I'm just, how are we going to,
Question for the universe. How are we gonna, deliver,
more appropriate targets without setting ourselves up to either fail or over succeed, you know what I mean? Just a, something that my head needs to look through somebody else's help.
So through you, Chair, what we have been doing is keeping an issues register during the period of this LTP, which will help us when we go to update the targets for the next LTP. The measures, which lead the level of service and the measures and targets that are underneath for developed by cross-divisional groups of staff together, and we've had some really helpful feedback from the auditors since that time, which goes into that issues register along with things we encounter ourselves, and we're reasonably confident that we can do a much more robust job next year.
I guess the risk committee will also, got some saying.
That's right, and it does come through to council for that check and, you know, to oversight as well.
That's a good question, actually. On the climate change work that I was just looking at, we were going to set up a mechanism to engage with youth by June.
Yeah, there's a lot happening in that space, I am pleased to report. So we have a workshop coming up. I'm not sure which exact date next month, but there's one coming up very soon. We'll be sharing the research that's been happening in that space and some of the ideas. So, discussion very shortly.
Al?
Yeah, and climate change and community resilience again. I know we've got 458 kilometres of stop banks in the region. They're there to protect property lives and livelihoods. Have we got a planning? Do we know what that's going to cost us to bring all those things up to standard?
Through each year with that one, that infrastructure strategy component of the long-term plan process is very much is in that space. What are the big infrastructure issues for the next 30 years plus? How do we as a council respond? So in those the workshop, this very shortly as we deal with the new contribution.
Okay. Anything else, Rachel? No, all right.
Maybe a move for June.
Lyndall, second, Phil. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you, and thanks, Rachel. Item 5, investment report. Welcome back, Tanya.
okay, we get back to setting. Thank you, Chair. So, investment report to the 31st of March. Before the be able to start over the 9 month period, the portfolio increased in value by 1.7 million, 1.3 million. That was not expected. Considering if you look at the volatility on the graph on page 103, we did some significant, we moved up, down. At the point that is still the situation, the balance today is and the forecasting statement, excuse me, that you saw earlier, we're actually forecasting that might reverse or could reverse, simply because we don't know. That is the amount of money that we're moving in a month. What we do know though is that interest rates have increased our income, our reliable income, interest rate increases. So while we will pay more in debt, we are rolling credit and substantially more in some places, 274,000 year to date we've received from our on-call funds with ANZ versus 620,000 that we've received from dividends and interest from the portfolio. Quite a change from what we were looking at last year when we had less than 2% interest coming into the portfolio. I think perhaps if you look at page 102, at the bottom there, you'll see the benchmarks. This 9 month period was actually a rolling 12 months. New Zealand equity 3.5% versus a negative benchmark I think all but one of our benchmarks, one of our actual results, sorry, all but one of our actual results are better than benchmarks. While the average shows 1%, it's not startling. It was better than the market for that 12-month period. And other than that, I think I'll just perhaps take questions.
Okay, any questions? No?
A comment more than a question. I think it's gone through some pretty volatile times, and I think our cycle and our balance is probably showing itself over the long term to be actually reasonable. So it's starting to get the interest rate side of it coming up, and while the market's still volatile, we are moving in the right direction. Could change again, but I guess when we did move to 50%, I was a bit nervous, but actually over time, it seems to have served pretty well.
Thanks, Jim. Apart from the fact that the management fee always makes my hair curl, it's a curl actually. I've been in different organisations earlier in the week, and their benchmark results were way worse than ours. So interestingly, the management fee is working, I guess. But that's a very good result compared to what I've been elsewhere. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. Anything else? All right.
Happy to move, Mr.
Oh, yes, Chair.
Yeah, but I was just, I suppose, yeah, we adjusted our SIPO there a few years back, and it's certainly treated us well, but we are certainly in a different environment now. And where the cash is king and things like that, and see that it is at the moment. And as governments, try to work out inflation, trying to sort out the inflation, interest rates are going to stay at deposits at the moment. So that is something that has treated us all right. But in that environment, may not be the right structure looking ahead. It'll be an interesting few years, but they, JB Were will obviously come back to us on that.
Yeah. All right. So moved by Nicole, second by Jeremy. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Scary. Thank you. Thanks again, Tanya. Item 6, information management systems, etc. Welcome, Paula.
Say it's just me today, Jan's not actually here, so I'll try and present a bit more. So just firstly, to take the report as read, a couple of highlights from information management is that both our governance group and stewards group have now met, and we've actually got some tasks on the board. We'll be looking at actually producing a completed project plan for the quality assurance project in the next quarter. The stewards group are also actually reviewing what we call the data repository and ownership document, which identifies all our systems across the organisation, all the sets of data and records, and actually putting owners to that. What will actually happen with that? That will actually help us identify some dependencies between the different data sets and how teams can work together, and whether we can actually consolidate and identify like duplicate and triplicate content, where we can actually consolidate that all down and actually reduce some of the data sets. Further on, I'd probably like to say that our digitisation pilot project is still underway. We've got a staff member on site with the team in the next week, so they'll start scanning 300 files, and that will be completed in June. That will actually help us decide whether we actually want to embark on further digitisation projects, depending on cost and output effectively. We've been asked by Archives New Zealand to actually contribute in feedback to their draft review of the protected records list. So those protected records are the records that we actually have to keep under the compliance of the Public Records Act. That feedback needs to be back to them by the 30th of July. And we will embark on doing that together. It's quite a big list.
We completed our objective system upgrade and that went well. Got a few wee things that we're still working through with the vendor, but all in all, the functionality that they said they would provide has been provided. We did actually review some of the Privacy Week webinars. They focused a lot on AI, which was very interesting. A little bit scary at the same time, but it was actually really valuable content that the Privacy Commissioner provided for my team effectively. Moving on to Jane's report, she'd given me some wee things she'd like to highlight with regards to bringing data to life. She's saying that both the cameras for the groundwater data portal, maybe 3 cameras will be delivered and cameras will be up and going by the 30th of June. She said she's provided some snips of the quality of photos there, but she said the actual quality is much better than that. They are looking at reviewing their privacy statements around that. With regards to her contacts project, she's saying that over a quarter of the contacts have actually been verified, and she's actually just wanting to clarify that that doesn't mean that 75% are incorrect. It just means that 75% haven't still been verified. And she's also saying with her online services portal that there's been a 46% increase in our registered online customers, which is really great. That means that we've now got 3,160 registered customers. Within that verification, they do actually have the opportunity to actually verify their own contact at that time. So that's actually assisting in verifying our contacts as well. And with regards to her technology strategy, her draft strategy is completed and is being presented to the ERD on the 29th of May. Once that's endorsed, Jane will bring it back to this meeting, and she's saying hopefully the next. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Paula. Any questions? I have one about LiDAR. 109, I've got there that it's not actually mentioned, I don't think, but LiDAR on the Lower Mataura has just been published. Is published the right word for it? And I've had a look at it. It's good to see the slopes. You can see the slopes and the altitude of the area, but I haven't been able to see, it might be me, I haven't been able to see the actual digital elevation lines. I assume that they're there somewhere, but so if I haven't been able to find it, maybe other people haven't either. I know that we've got one from the Invercargill City Council for our reserve at the end of Ariti Road, and we've got all the lines of height and they've all got a number beside them, so down to a metre. And I thought that would have been useful for people that wanting to develop a wetland, for example, or knowing where they want to put their building to make sure it's not on a flood zone. I know that there's other methods to do that, but so the main question is, how easy is it for the general public to use the LiDAR information that's out there? Is it intended for general public use or not?
Well, I can't speak to that, right? It's a level of technological input that's above my pay grade. So, but I can get that answer. We'll get that answer for you. Don, do you?
No, I was about to say, do the same thing.
Yeah.
It certainly is available publicly for use.
Yeah.
It's on that site. Yeah.
Anybody else had a look at it? Good?
I mean, I've had a look. I think I encountered the same experience that you did. So the question that emerged to me is, do you need some additional GIS related software package, or is there an intent to provide some capability embedded within our websites that would enable people to engage with that on a more meaningful basis than what currently the experience seems to be for limited value you can probably take from the current. But again, I'm sure if you've got specialist GIS staff in your organisation, you can be all over it.
Thanks, Phil. Not the only one. Lyndall.
Next, page 108, the customer contact management project. Delighted that a quarter have been verified, but wondering what the initial timeframe was for the completion
I'd need to check. I mean, it's been ongoing. It's not been something that we have dedicated full staff member to, and as it sort of says in there, it's it will never be 100% completion because we you know, the data is changing all the time as well. So it is an ongoing piece of work. But I can ask for the project. Yeah, just
So if there's a risk that that's going to take 36 more months or whatever, then we need to be aware of that, I guess. And I'm assuming that at some point there's kind of a critical mass where actually you start getting people coming on and it's verified as, you know, as we go. So there might be a leap at some point.
Yeah.
And the time frame, because you know, you don't really want 75% of our contacts not verified for too long.
Yeah, and you know, just go back to the point that Paul made, it doesn't mean that the data is incorrect.
Yeah,
It's not verified.
Yeah.
Right, somebody like to move that we note the that report on item 6. Alistair, seconder. Bundle, all those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, now the annual activity plan, Tanya.
Thank you, Chair. So we've highlighted on here in blue changes from the last committee meeting. We're noting that on the 21st of June, we have a special committee meeting to review and recommend the annual plan to the council as a whole. In the past, that would have gone to an OPAC meeting. So it's now been allocated to the finance and performance committee. That will be complete with the fees and charges schedule, which is currently up for consultation. See that we've included in this meeting the auditor's engagement letter and fee proposal. There is a new government funded report separate to the financial report that gives some more information on the projects and non-financial aspects. I draw your attention to the 23rd of August. We have a financial delegations review. That is currently out with a very experienced corporate GM who's reviewing our delegations for us, doing a very good, very thorough ground-up review of that. We look forward to that recommendation. And the policy and program reviews, the strategic asset review and SIPO review, they were, I think, earlier in the year. They are now scheduled for the September Finance and Performance meeting. They will follow the investment strategy work that we're doing with Hamilton. Our timeline there is come back to you with some more work on the investment strategy, then actually look at the individual assets within that we currently hold within that strategy. And at the same time, do another SIPO review or certainly a refresh to ensure that it is still fit for purpose in the current environment, as we alluded to earlier. There are some of the changes that we're suggesting.
Okay. Any questions on that, Lyndall?
On the next slide, the forward planning. Remind me if I've forgotten the iwi Charter of Understanding. Did we actually do that last year?
Currently, Kamarama are busy engaging a New Zealand consultant with the individual runanga to determine what their desire is, things that they'd like Kamarama to prioritise going forward with the charter. So no, it's not updated yet, but the goal is in Kamarama's support with that one. So that's been ongoing over the last few months.
We have Possibility of when that might come back to this committee then?
Been asked for an update from Tom Roma. The last update we got was they get engaged the consultants, so they're just going through the process with the Runanga now. I will bring an update to you.
I appreciate that their processes are different to ours and they take time. And respect that, just if we can have it pop up. There's a possibility that this year that would be.
Thanks, Bendel. Okay, anything else? Jeremy?
Just one point where, I was just looking at the cyber review. In September. Just, you don't know who's going to be in government in October. And I know, I'm just looking at it from what, is it prudent to do then, things may change. I'm just saying, I can see how all of a sudden, what's happening, what we need to change. It was just one of those things that you're just doing it just before an election, whether in the November might be better time. I don't know how the financial markets out.
Well, through your chair, we'll be bringing the draft to you in September.
Right.
I think it will be enduring, ideally. Ideally, it is enduring through those things. That's the point, yes. Yes.
So I'm not making any decisions in September, we'll just have a draft.
Have to move the item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and a seconder, Alistair, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you very much again, Tanya and Rachel. Now we have to go into public excluded. For the next item, item 8.